I started by saying that one of the relations between capitalism and democracy is contradiction.
Well, first of all, we should bear in mind that we don't have a capitalist system. And no capitalist system has ever survived. It would self-destruct in 5 minutes. So what we have is a kind of state capitalist system, with the state playing a substantial role in American history, a very substantial role in economic development, in production, and research and development, a lot of other bailouts, lots of other devices to keep the private sector viable.
And the people who really sort of believe in markets, or at least pretend to understand that. So if you read Milton Friedman and other apostles of so-called libertarianism, they don't call for democracy. They call for what they call freedom, which is a very restrictive concept of freedom. It's not the freedom of a working person to control their work, their lives, and so on. It's their freedom to submit themselves to control by a higher authority. That's called freedom, but not democracy. They don't like democracy, and they're right. Capitalism and democracy really are inconsistent. What's called libertarianism in the United States is about as extreme an example of anti-libertarianism that you can imagine. They're in favor of private tyranny, the worst kind of tyranny. Tyranny by unaccountable private concentrations of wealth. When they say, well, we don't want government interference in the market, they mean that. They mean, maybe they don't understand it, but if you think it through, it's pretty obvious. The kind of interference in the market they want to block is the kind that would permit unconstrained tyranny on the part of totally unaccountable private tyrannies, which is what corporations are. Now, they like to invoke, say, Adam Smith, but if you read Adam Smith, he said the opposite. Claim is that he was opposed to regulation, government regulation, interference in markets. It's not true. He was in favor of regulation, as he put it, when it benefits the working man. He was against interference when it benefited the masters. That's traditional classical liberalism. And it's kind of astonishing to me that a lot of young people, say college students, are attracted by this kind of thing. I mean, you can, after all, read the classical texts. So take, say, Adam Smith. I mean, Adam Smith at the time, he's the icon, you know, of liberty. He was considered to be a dangerous radical at the time because he was pretty anti-capitalist. It's sort of pre-capitalist era, but he was opposed to it. He condemned what he called the vile maxim of the masters of mankind. All for ourselves and nothing for anyone else. That's an abomination. Take the phrase invisible hand. Everybody's learned that in high school or college. Adam Smith actually did use the term, rarely. But take a look at how he used it. In Wealth of Nations, his major work, it's used once. If you look at the context, it's an argument against what is now called neoliberal globalization. He said, suppose in England that the merchants and manufacturers invested abroad and imported from abroad. He said, well, that would be profitable for them, but would be harmful to the people of England. However, they will have enough of a commitment to their own country, to England, what's called a home bias in the literature. They'll have enough of a home bias so that, as if by an invisible hand, they'll keep to the less profitable actions, and England will be saved from the ravages of what we call neoliberal globalization. The United States in 1945 did move towards laissez-faire. In fact, there was an important conference. The United States was basically running the world at that point, you know, for obvious reasons. there was a hemispheric conference called by Washington, February 1945 in Mexico, where the Western Hemisphere was compelled to adopt an economic charter for the Americas, which banned any interference with market principles. The goal was, you read the State Department reports, to oppose the new nationalism in Latin America, which is based on the idea that the that the people of a country should benefit from the country's resources. That's evil. Can't allow that. It's Western and U.S. investors who have to benefit from their resources. So that was the economic charter of the Americas, imposed on the countries of the hemisphere, with one exception here. The United States did not follow those policies. Quite the contrary, as I mentioned. There was a massive development of a state-based economy with an industrial policy, the kind that created the modern high-tech economy. If you looked at MIT in the 1950s, when I got there, it was surrounded by electronics-based high-tech firms like Raytheon and iTech, huge IT firms. You take a look at MIT today, take a look at the buildings. It's Novartis, Pfizer, and so on. The reason is completely obvious. During the 50s and 60s, the cutting edge of the economy was electronics-based. So the way to get the public to pay for it was to scream Russians and to get them to pay higher taxes for the Pentagon. And then the Pentagon would fund the research and development, like my own salary, for example. I shouldn't complain too much. And and of course, so-called private industry was around there like vultures to pick up the products and the research and just market it. Well, since the 70s, the cutting edge of the economy has been moving towards being biology-based. So funding, government funding, has shifted. Pentagon funding is declining. Funding from the NIH and other so-called health-related government institutions is increasing. And the private corporations understand that. So now Novartis, genetic engineering firms and so on are hanging around trying to pick up the research that you're paying for so that they can market it and make profits. It's just transparent. It's in front of our eyes. And it takes a very effective educational system to prevent people from seeing it. It's virtually transparent. That's the way really existing capitalist democracy works.